know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
makes me act the way I do.
This is Undead Live Morning Edition, reporting from the front lines of the zombie apocalypse. We have your back morning, noon, and night, whether you're dead, undead, recently deceased, or fully alive. Today is Friday, October 16th, and I'm Athena Actipus.
And I'm Dave Lundberg-Kenrick, and today we will be, our second day live streaming from the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting. We've been talking to experts from across science, medicine, and the arts, hearing their analysis of everything that's been going on all around us.
And now for our Apocalypse Today highlights. You might not realize it, but your love life may be zombified. This morning, author Emily Witt will share her insights about how to de-zombify your romantic relationships, and she also explores the question of whether marriage is dead or undead.
And political science professor Mzilikazi Kone is well known for her dead-on insights about the ways that zombies intersect with issues of race, slavery, and labor in the Americas. During our afternoon edition, she will share her brains with us.
And author, physician, and evolutionary biologist Barbara Natterson-Horowitz reveals how we can learn about our human nature and human health from looking across the tree of life. She'll be joining us this evening on Undead Live.
So join us all day here for up-to-date reports on these exciting developments. We will be delivering fresh brains and food for thought morning, noon, and night.
And if you're joining our broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, please join our reporting team by commenting about the goings-on in your city or neighborhood. We need to know what is happening on the ground, so please do share.
Yeah, simply comment on this stream on whatever platform you're on, and we will be able to see your reports in real time and bring them into our broadcast. So, in fact, we have a report coming in right now from our Frontline correspondents, Steve and Larry.
All right, Steve and Larry, welcome. We're so excited to have you back.
Are we back? Are we on?
You guys are on. You are on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're back too. There's a lot to talk about, I think.
How you doing, Steve?
I'm okay. There's some weird stuff going down, Larry. I know what you saw yesterday and everything, and there's someone was on my porch. Peanut butter has lots of iron in it. I didn't know if you knew that, but it's good. But I'm
kind on your porch, man.
What porch? What are you talking? Oh, the porch. Yeah, the porch outside. There was someone. I took a video. I made a on the phone the way you can hold it up. So I took a video. I'm a little scared. I don't know what to do. Can we show it? Can I show? I think I sent it to these guys. Maybe they could show it.
Yeah, let's have a look, man. Let's see.
We're okay. Live. No, this is important. You're getting this. Mm-hmm. Okay, just look. You know how we keep our porch, right?
Yeah.
Do we keep our porch neat, right?
Yeah.
Like everything's in. Just do we keep our porch neat? What?
Dad.
Well, look at somebody did something. Somebody did this thing. Somebody's messing with us, and who's that? Someone's walking. Who's that? Someone's walking.
Dad, stop it. Dad, you're scaring me. Dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, did you figure out what had happened?
No. I heard. This is good. I heard noises outside, and I went out there. And you've seen my porch. You've seen. I keep it neat. Like we are organized people here. We try.
No, I get it. What did your daughter think?
She thought I was a little strange and overreacting. She said I was scaring her. Can you imagine, like, what could possibly be scary? There were people walking down the street, and I didn't know who they were. They were just walking down the street. And then our porch, did you see the porch, how it was messed up and stuff? So I know I told you not to worry yesterday. I don't know. I just feel like there might be something to worry about. Something's going down. I don't know what it is.
Well, we should just be calm, I guess, and analyze it. I mean, was there any thievery or robbery going on with your porch?
I didn't look. It was just so there's just chaos out there, so it was hard to see. And plus, there was someone coming down the street. And why do you keep looking behind you?
Well, I feel I had this sort of stranger showing up yesterday and then disappearing, and now you're all hyped up, and I'm just sort of wondering whether the social fabric is unraveling. I'm just getting a little anxious. I'm up here alone. Where's the wife and kid? Are they helping calm you down?
Oh, they're fine. They're fine. Why would you worry about them?
Well, remember yesterday you said you took the carcass or whatever, that whole thing, but then you couldn't remember where you've been. So I'm just trying to track your stability at this point.
That's true. Yeah, I did. I think I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay, but we got to contain the hysteria. I mean, we're on TV or whatever
Are we live? Are we on now?
Well, yeah, we've been on, and we should be.
Okay. I'm sorry. We're fine. Everything's fine. There's nothing to worry about out here. We'll keep bringing you the stories, but I think we'll get back to talking about movies. We'll talk about movies soon.
Yeah. Okay. So we should. Okay. We're just gonna gather our thoughts. We're sorry, guys. I mean, I guess it's all relevant to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, we're just glad to see that you're all right. Like Alana says, you guys made it through the night, so that's a relief. And just stay tight, and we hope we'll hear from you again later today.
Is it possible somebody's messing with you guys? Like, it seems like a lot of stuff. Like at first yesterday, it was like, all right, a deer, like a guy outside, like.
Well, it's only weird because we're in completely different places. So it would, I mean, unless you guys are doing it to get your ratings.
Is it you guys?
we're in Phoenix. Like, we're totally. I mean,
you
it's
said
not
you were in
me.
Phoenix. I just see you on a screen.
Actually, I know I'm in Phoenix. I'm fairly certain Athena is still in front of the same wall in Flagstaff. So I mean, I don't think it's us, really, but I do think.
Seeing anything online about increased? I'm going into town today. I'm going to just take the temperature in there and see what's cooking, and if this is just literally in my head and Steve's having his own freak out. I don't know. It's just a little alarming.
I think I'm okay. I'm not freaked out. Okay. Everything's gonna be fine. I'll stay in touch. Larry, you and I'll talk. We'll bring them whatever's coming. Just be careful in town, okay?
Yeah, it seems weird. Like at this point, it really does. It's starting to feel like something's up. I don't know what's up, but something's up. Also, yeah. Steve, I don't know that cough. We're getting a lot of comments saying you got to check out that cough. So.
It's okay. It's allergies.
Okay. All right.
It's fine. We'll talk.
Well, thanks, guys.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us. So we have another report from the front lines of the zombie apocalypse. Our dispatches from dystopia with our correspondents, Matthias Claessens and Colton Scrivener. Colton and Matthias, welcome.
Hi. Can you hear us?
Yes. Where are you reporting from?
We are reporting from Violet, Denmark, in an abandoned fishery where we think the source of the zombie apocalypse is.
Oh my! Tell us more.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because this is an old rundown factory, but we've been getting reports of government officials wandering around in the area in recent months. So we think, rumor has it, and this sounds ridiculous, I realize, but rumor has it that because of some scientific experiment, a substance called dark matter may have escaped from another portal and may be implicated in the zombie outbreak.
Can you guys show us around a little bit? Anything that you can show us to help us understand what's going on would be wonderful.
Yeah, so we're just now getting in, so you can actually explore with us, I guess.
Yeah, we're not supposed to be here, so we'll try to keep it on the down low. So we're entering the factory now. And I think we might have to take you outside.
There's some sort of vials here. Not sure what they're for, though.
So we're going down.
A tube or chute of some sort. So we're going to take you down with us. All there seems to be stuff. Government camouflage. Are you still with us?
Yeah, we're still
Yeah.
here. So you just took us into the building, into the factory.
Yes, we're coming in through the basement, and there are skeletons everywhere. We're going to take you into what we think the dark matter is leaking from.
Yeah, except for I want to have a real. Do we have time for a real quick check this other way?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you guys, those skeletons in the background look suspiciously similar to what Steve found outside his house, that deer. It's a little concerning.
Although they're people, which is...
They're people, yeah, that's even more concerning.
Where did Matthias go? I think we lost Matthias.
It's good to see that Diana still has a sense of humor about all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna take you a little further, but then we may have to go because we'll have to sneak around a little more. We can't have the lights and cameras so much.
This is really disconcerting.
Kind of bone chopping machinery.
Yeah.
And creepy music. So this, we think, is the dark matter that's causing the zombie apocalypse.
Don't touch it, Colton. Be careful.
That's my thought too.
Yeah.
And a weirdly upside down room.
We're not sure what has happened in here.
Some sort of rift in the space-time continuum, perhaps?
Yeah, could be.
Some sort of patient's bed, maybe, with blood or something.
Yeah, we don't want to touch that either.
Yeah.
But there are certainly many signs of activity that do not suggest fishing business.
Yes. But I think we need to probably go, Athena, because I think we hear some people coming and don't want to alert them too much.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you don't get in trouble there. We don't want anything to happen to you guys.
If you guys pass those skeletons again, Carlos said they look human. Can you tell? Do they look human to you guys? It's hard to tell from here without the flesh.
It seems to be human. Maybe some kind of mutated humans, though. Some of the physiology is not matching up with regular human physiology.
Yeah. And then that grinding machine that's right before where it seems like the space-time things seem to be falling apart. So does it seem like that's connected?
It's unclear. There's no blood on it, so I don't know if it's for the skeletons or if it's for something else. But okay, we have one more room to show you. Matthias just found this other room.
It's a disturbing mix of sort of the scientific and the occult.
Yes,
Yeah, this doesn't look good. I'm thinking maybe child experiments.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Okay, so now we're in some sort of passcode room. Mark, if you want to show them maybe the walls.
Wow. So, Matthias, what are you guys doing there right now? Are you trying to do research while the apocalypse is going on?
Yeah, we are.
So, we actually have a group of assistants outside, and we're recruiting people. We give them the scale, it's morbid curiosity scale, and only the people who are the most morbidly curious so far have been able to enter. So we're kind of screening people as they come in, so that we only get people who are brave enough, I guess, to come in here.
Yeah.
Linda, by the way, mentions that she wants to visit. Oddly enough, like
She must be pretty high in this morbid curiosity. So.
Well, I think we hear something. Matthias is going to go check it out, and then we'll
Oh.
This is really, really creepy, guys.
So, yeah, we heard some noises back in the skeleton room, but we're gonna check first. Yeah, I think we found some infected, so we have to be very quiet.
If they can hear us, they have very good hearing.
Okay, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll call you tomorrow with more, okay?
All right, guys. Take care. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, hopefully they're all right. I hope we'll hear back from them tomorrow. That was horrifying.
I mean, I just wonder. You think that's connected? Like, so they're studying terror, right? They're at a point where that's what they're actively looking into. But then, I mean, Steve and Larry were just. I mean, I guess they've studied terror in the past, but I'm trying to figure out, are they?
I think we're just going to have to hopefully get some more reports later today from Steve and Larry, and hopefully we'll hear from Colton and Matthias again tomorrow.
We got to check in on Colton because it didn't look good. Yeah. But now I think we just need to focus on trying to gather as much information as possible. So if you viewers at home, if you know anything, if you notice anything happening in your neighborhood, in your city, please report that. You can just make a comment on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Let us know what you see happening in your area. So hopefully we can really gather some more information, try to see if we can make sense of this pattern. And helping us to report now and kind of bring things together, we have peer-reviewed rapper Baba Brinkman with us now. Baba, welcome to Undead Live. It's great to have you here. We kind of need a little bit of relief after seeing all of that.
I mean, it's a pretty tragic moment. I'll try to spin this into some dark poetry and humor, I guess.
Yeah. So a reminder, everybody at home, please send in your comments. Send them in now. Tell us what is happening. And Baba, I'm just going to let you take it away at this point.
And tell me, did they say they were broadcasting from Denmark? What did they say?
Yeah, they're from Denmark.
Wow. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Is that beat coming through okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Check it. The scientific freaking rapper. Diana's asking about zombie fecal matter. Yes, indeed. I mean, come on, son, they do, and it smells like onions. And yeah, check it out. All day I could freestyle. Meow Wealth in Santa Fe. That's how it gets reopened after we're nostalgic. This is Baba Brinkman, and I'm straight freestyling. Only the curious have something to find. That's what I think when I reach in my brain for some rhymes like Nickel Creek. This is the way I speak, and people listen, and they usually say it is unique. It's charming, never brain harming. Yeah, this latest development is alarming. The zombies are coming, they're getting organized, but for now it's just Baba Brinkman with the scorching rhymes. They're chasing us right now, it's kind of insane. Cleaning teeth in the morning and watching the rain out the window. Zombies coming saying brains, but I just got a report from some melancholy Danes. Yeah, up in Denmark, up in my brain, lots of different type of neurons then spark. And I think right now the whole community is starting to pursue that horde immunity, I mean herd mentality, like the president said. Check it out, zombie disco and they're dead, undead. Yeah, check it out, I'm rocking. It's concerning that Steve is coughing. I mean, come on, what planet am I on? Maybe he's got infected with prions, heme in the red blood cells. People, quick, you gotta protect yourselves. I mean, I got rhymes if you want it. Something a second ago about iron content in human skeletons. Yeah, mad intelligence. People listen to the rhymes, they're like, damn, that's relevant. I'm just rocking for the Canadians, but I'm kind of nice with those catacomb Scandinavians deep underground. They're digging in the place. This is zombies, they're all over the space, trying to eat my brains and eat my face. I want to visit, I'm coming with the lyrics, yes indeed, come on. I'm speaking, y'all, I just got that immunity joke from Peter Todd. This is the way I rock, like Peter Tosh, Bob Marley right now, I'm speaking lots, yeah, the human flesh is kinda tasty to a zombie, I'm assuming, yes, they could not dance as nice as John Travolta, so you can dance off with them, I hope so. Yeah, just do a battle rap, this is how we do it up in the zombie habitat, I'm just having that. Right now, I just gotta quickly adapt overseas with the dope beats. Hopefully, people listen to me and then they proceed to see a way out of that zombie apocalypse. Baba Brinkman coming on day 2, straight rocking this. And that's the end of my rap. Don't get trapped in that zombie fly trap. All right, back to Dave and Athena. Baba Brinkman always coming through the speaker.
Baba, that was amazing. All that came from your brains in the moment, huh?
Yeah, and it's very flow state, like, you know, you zone out and it's just like words, rhymes, associations, and you know, I feel like there's a zombification process where your like intentionality gets turned off and you're just zoning when you rap, freestyle rap. I've done it since I was like 19, and it's the funnest thing. I
mean, as we're thinking about it now, you know, it's also like you're pulling a lot of things together, which is sort of what we're trying to do with this apocalypse, you know, trying to figure out, pull it like, and hearing it laid out like that. It's, I don't know, it makes everything that's going on seem really related. So
yeah, the thing from last night, I mean, about the, you know, anti-rigidity thinking is necessary to survive the apocalypse. I've been grooving on that more and more. I'm starting to think like freestyle rap may be the path forward for humanity to survive and not get caught in little cages of fear and, you know, rote zombie-like thinking where you just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great point, Baba. And we're really looking forward to seeing you back on Late Night Brains tonight. Maybe you can pull some more of these threads together for us, help us figure out what's going on.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to have a lot of fun with the sex and technology session. I'm fascinated to hear what everyone has to say. And yeah, looking forward to the day.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Baba. So speaking of sex and technology, more Americans than ever live alone, and yet many of our social institutions and laws continue to be organized around the idea of monogamous partnership. Marriage isn't dead, but for many people it is undead, a specter that haunts our imagination and defines our sense of success or failure in adult life. And we have author Emily Witt here with us today to answer our questions and share her advice about strategies for de-zombifying our love life.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, Emily. Thanks so much for being here with us.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm worried about Colton and Matthias, though. I hope they survive the zombie apocalypse just so we can have a rave in that warehouse someday, because it's pretty sweet.
It does seem pretty awesome. I hope that we will have some apocalyptic or some post-apocalyptic moments in that space.
I mean, guys, come on. They were chased out of there. I feel like that's the idea of us doing a rave there. Maybe now's not the time.
Well, they have to defeat the zombies first. I mean, it sounds like they were on the brink of some kind of confrontation. I really hope they're okay.
That's true. That's a hopeful way of looking at it. So I think, yeah, you're right. I'll keep my spirits up.
So Emily, you're thinking a lot about sort of zombification and what is happening in terms of our love lives. So what are your thoughts about, what is going on in terms of how this, zombie apocalypse is actually infiltrating so many aspects of our interpersonal relationships with other people?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting framework in which to think of some of the ideas that I've been thinking about. And yeah, I mean, I think, so just to introduce myself a little, my name is Emily Witt, and I'm a staff writer at The New Yorker, and I am also the author of the book Future Sex.
That book is awesome, I have to say. So, Emily, I read that book, and then I just kind of instantly became a fangirl. So that's why I kind of reached out and I was like, Emily, can you come to ZAM and tell us what your thoughts are about zombification and sex and love? Because that book was really mind-blowing.
Yeah. So I thought I would start. I was reading this other book. It's called The Odd Woman in the City by the writer Vivian Gornick. She's a older feminist critic and novelist, memoirist. She lives in New York, and this book, which came out in 2015, is a little about, it's a memoir, a kind of essay about being what she calls the odd woman, which is a person who didn't marry, or she married maybe once or twice, but didn't stay married, has lived alone for a long time, and what it feels like to live alone and to feel like you're a little bit outside of the mainstream, or odd, as she puts it. And I thought I would start by just like reading a little bit from this, which I think she kind of defines the zombie condition that I'm trying to get at here. So she says, what would it matter then that I was giving up love? She says that at some point she gave up on romantic love. As it turned out, it mattered more than I had ever dreamed it would. As the years went on, I saw that romantic love was injected like dye into the nervous systems of my emotions, laced through the entire fabric of longing, fantasy, and sentiment. It haunted the psyche, was an ache in the bones, so deeply embedded in the makeup of the spirit, it hurt the eyes to look directly into its influence. It would be a cause of pain and conflict for the rest of my life. I prized my hardened heart. I have prized it all these years, but the loss of romantic love can still tear at it. And so I wanted to read that because, you know, this is a person who has been single by choice, more or less, for a long time, or identifies as a single person. And yet this ideal of romantic love and monogamous partnership still resides in her like an infection. You know, she calls it a dye that runs through her veins. So I thought that was kind of illustrative of this zombie idea of how monogamous partnership, even if you're outside of it by choice or by circumstance, can still be the dominant model of how you think you're supposed to live. And if you don't have it, you feel kind of anxious about it. And yet, empirically speaking, our structures, our population has changed. In the United States, according to the Pew Foundation, in 2017, 42% of American adults were unpartnered. So that's a really substantial number of people. It's barely a minority. And if you look at people under the age of 35, that number is so much higher. So 61% of adults under the age of 35 are unpartnered. So it is a majority condition. And yet there's a way in which I mean, I probably don't have to explain to anybody in their 30s how it feels to go home for Thanksgiving and try to you know, answer all the questions from your aunts about why you haven't met somebody and what's going on. It's always seen as this kind of temporary condition that you need to solve. And so much of our sexual narratives are organized around this idea of needing to meet somebody. And where the trajectory of your adult life is this idea that you maybe experiment in your 20s and you date, and then you meet somebody and you reach a kind of denouement that will endure for some long time in your life, where your sexuality is kind of settled and organized towards partnership. even though that's for many of us not the reality, even if we wish it were. So when I started writing Future Sex, I was 30. I was recently out of a relationship once again. I was very frustrated with being single. And I was tired of longing for this thing, this zombie idea of monogamous partnership that was eluding me. And I decided to suspend that idea and to see what would happen if I let myself consider what it would mean to just live in singledom and to accept it as a kind of long-term condition, and how to pursue sexuality within that condition beyond just dating and the framework of dating and romantic love. And as I began to explore this idea, I became conscious that there had been 3 major changes in our culture. And I should say that there's nothing really new with like sexuality. You can't really invent sexuality again. There's actually nothing new, but the language changes, the stories and the societal structures around sexuality change. So 3 things had changed. The first change was technological. We had the internet now, which gave us access to a vast repository of images and more, ability to visualize sexual fantasies of a very wide range than ever in human history. It gave us new ways to meet people through internet dating. It gave us new ways to find community. So if you were a statistical minority, a sexual minority, if you were trans, if you were gay, if you were, if you were a furry, if you were polyamorous, you now could go online and not feel alone and find that there were many others like you out there in the world. The second change was the one I already described, of more people living alone, more people not getting married or not staying married, or getting married much later in life and having these prolonged periods of life where they were unpartnered. And then the third change was a sort of moral one, where our country, our society in general, not totally, but was gaining so much more understanding about the diversity of sexual orientations and identifications and gender spectrums, and learning that there was no longer a kind of consensus about what a sexual partnership should look like, or a kind of mold that everybody steps into in adult life had fallen away. And there was now just understanding, but also the confusion that comes with choice and a proliferation of choice. So that was what was new and what was different. And I decided to kind of explore the different possibilities available to me within this new reality. And some of them were obvious ones: internet dating, some of them, and internet pornography, which, for some people will be a very mundane thing, but for others, you'd be surprised. I think, for speaking personally, I had absorbed certain like feminist ideals without even sort of realizing it about pornography, and had avoided it or thought it wasn't me. And so I began exploring that. I researched new relationship structures like polyamory. I tried a practice called orgasmic meditation, which is meant to be a sexual practice that's totally removed from dating, romance, the narrative of love, the zombie narrative, that creates a kind of contained practice in which you can contemplate sexuality outside of all of those stories that, especially if you're a woman, you might have been told your whole life. And I'm looking at the comments. I'm not anti-marriage. I mean, I would love to be married, trust me, but it just isn't available to everybody. And I think a lot of people know that even if it's the thing you most want in the world, might not be there. And some of that is structural, some of that is choice. So that, what did I learn from all of this? I learned that even when I'm alone, I don't need to feel alone. And that even in a moment like right now with COVID, where people are scared about in-person meetings, there's possibilities of, for example, the idea of internet sexuality, of people that prefer mediated sexual experiences to in-person interaction, and that you can find connection and a sense of belonging in these communities, even if you don't have the kind of partnership you might want or might not want. But then the second thing I realized was like kind of more a societal thing, that here we are. Oh, thank you, Linda. Here we are, in a country where our tax laws, our childcare systems, our, a lot of our health care, a lot of this is organized around this zombie idea of the monogamous partnership that, while it still exists and it's still great, nothing against it, so pernicious to cling to this as the consensus model of our reality, because we're doing a disservice to the many people that are living on their own. And when you organize your society around an ideal that's no longer empirically the reality, things get really out of sync. And so it ends up being a little bit of a policy question, even, to de-zombify your love life and de-zombify this as the dominant model when it's simply no longer the case. So that's what I found. I'm happy to open it up.
Emily, that was really, really fascinating, and just like a huge frame shift, I think, and bringing up a lot of really important issues. We have a bunch of questions and comments from the audience. Dave, is there anything that you wanted to jump in with before we take a question?
I'm curious about the book you were reading. Does she end up at the end? I'm just going to ask you to spoil it. Does she end up falling in love, or does she end up sort of coming to terms with sort of being on her own?
No, it's more of a meditation. It's kind of it's a short book, and it's about her friendship with a friend of hers who's a gay man who also lives alone, and their sense of outsiderness, their sense of melancholy that comes with it, but also acceptance that they chose this. So it doesn't really come to any kind of synthesis or conclusion. It's just kind of like, a little bit of a journey into what it feels like to have had this life.
Okay, interesting. So,
yeah, I actually wanted to bring something up. I think we're doing a lot of perspective shifting here. And one thing that strikes me from, having lots of friendships with women who are, I'm reaching the end of my 30s. So I've had a lot of friends who've gotten divorced. I've gotten divorced. And I think a lot of people who are married also, like within marriage, give up on romantic love sometimes.
That's true, probably.
And kind of accept a loneliness even within marriage. So I think it might not be just a question of, if you're identifying as single or not, but really a question of, whether that idea of having that romantic love is something that motivates you to change your life, or if you accept not having it, whether you are, partnered or not, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really came, I didn't even expect this book to change me so much as in the way that it did. But one of the things I learned is that, okay, you're partnered. You think your sexuality might be kind of settled. It actually doesn't need to be. And exploring sexuality doesn't need to be hooking up with a ton of people on Tinder, even though it could be that if you wanted. It can be a very internal journey. It can be reading books. It can be considering different kinds of fantasies that you've never considered before. It can be like a very personal exploration. So even within partnership, it's possible to explore your story and question it and critique it and look at it from different angles.
So can I ask, because I sort of relate to this lady in the story you were reading. In a sense that I've essentially sort of stopped dating. But when I hear this idea of like exploring your sexuality and sort of not monogamous, it still feels to me like still defining life through like just different variants on sort of attraction and partnership, right? Even if they're sort of transient. And so I just wonder, like, I wonder, is that like, I don't know, is it like, hey, if you want to quit drinking, try smoking meth, I guess, you know, like, are you like, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, is it going to actually protect someone from sort of the pain and heartbreak that I think I would be looking to avoid? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I also wish I could avoid that. Unfortunately, to love is to experience pain. No love story ends happily. No love story. It doesn't matter how happy your marriage was. When it ends, it's going to feel really bad. So, and if it ends even of natural causes. So
I mean, if you die first, then you know, then it's their problem.
That's true. Then you're lucky. You're lucky.
Yeah. So
extremely lucky.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I think maybe the better analogy is you quit drinking and you start meditating instead of smoking meth, or you start, you know, I think we all have a story about the adult life we think we're supposed to have. And if you're cisgendered and you're heterosexual or mostly heterosexual, that story, it's really easy to not write it yourself, to see it in the movies and to say like, okay, you know, this is my story. I'm going to date in my 20s and I'm going to meet somebody and get married and we're going to live happily ever after. And once that doesn't work out and you realize you have to write your own story, I don't think it needs to involve like sex camming but it can. I think it's a question of every human has a certain sexual impulse. Some people want to connect it with other people. Some people want to bring it internally and live a solitary sexual existence. And that doesn't even necessarily mean celibacy, but we all have it and we all need to sort of like grapple with it. And I think what I'm saying was sort of like Undead, at least with me, was just, you know, wanting to meet somebody, wanting there to be this chemistry, this idea of chemistry that I couldn't name the thing that I wanted. And so for me, it was a lot about like learning what turned me on. You know, being able to name things that I thought were sort of ephemeral and magic and alchemical. Was there a way to bring that into my own reality through study and through exploration? And while realizing that even if I hung out with polyamorous and went to their sex party, I didn't need to adopt that lifestyle, but I could at least like give it a shot.
So we're gonna bring on some other guests in a sec, but I have one. So like in your experience, I guess my big question is like, is it possible to really detach the emotional? You know, I always hear these songs like Bulletproof, where it's like, this time I'll be bulletproof. And it always seems like somebody, and like Chandelier, you know, and it's always like, I'm going to go out and I'm not going to get emotionally attached. But there's always this sort of foreboding sense of, you're gonna get emotionally, you know, it's like in this, you know, it's like, I do think like, I don't know, maybe I'm not the only person when they hear Bulletproof, I'm like, that's a thing you're telling yourself. So I don't know, do you feel it's really possible to disconnect the sort of physical and the emotional? No.
No. And, you know, part of, I think bringing dating into the realm of like official practice, into this sort of like chaos where we put it is establishing better ethics and better manners around internet dating and yeah. So how do you formalize this somewhat chaotic process so that it does allow for emotional care? And how do you have a casual erotic friendship, for example, where there's care involved? Is it possible?
Yeah, we have a question here from Liz Grumbach along these lines. So, what would a world and society look like where monogamous relationships aren't so privileged? So, how does that manifest? Are we more connected in our communities, more rooted in our networks? Does the, quality of kind of those relationships change in this kind of world?
Yeah, I think it's on a kind of personal, social level, friendship. The demands on friendship become a little bit higher, and friends have to learn to see themselves and talk about things that like end of life care, like caring for the sick, things that have traditionally been left to the realm of family. You already see things happening like co-parenting arrangements between friends for people that want to have kids but don't have romantic partnership. And then on a societal level, I mean, I think in Europe, they're much better at this than in the US, but in America, we have to start thinking very hard about what it means that so many people are on their own and what we need to do to make sure that people are cared for when they're in a place of vulnerability. And we need to start treating single parents as not some kind of like oddity or aberration, but as the norm. And how do we, take care of people?
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going to bring on our commentator, Dr. Jason Scott. Dr. Scott, you introduce yourself briefly and tell us what some of your thoughts are about how this connects to zombies and the zombie apocalypse.
Oh, you're muted, Dr. Scott.
Muted. Hello. Classic apocalypse blooper, right? Really fascinated to be listening to Emily talk about the way that we discover new kinds of identities and new kinds of sexualities when we're put in this place of being unfamiliar. My background is in zombie mythology and how we tell stories about zombies. And I'm particularly fascinated by the idea of zombies as the uncanny. I certainly didn't invent that idea. But the uncanny means that the zombies know our secrets. And in a way, zombies have found a way to disconnect their physical experience from their emotional. So that's one of the secrets that they carry, that they represent, that makes them so scary to us, is that they are in that space where their sexuality is not tied to emotion. Their bodies, their sensations, how they seek pleasure has nothing to do with what we usually layer on top of it all, socially speaking. So for people like me who are non-binary, or people who are single, or people who find alternative expressions of sexuality, I think we can find zombies a very powerful example of what happens when you just say, I'm just not going to play that game anymore. I'm just not going to fit into that pattern of how people are supposed to glom together. Instead of having a partner that I procreate with, I'm going to have the zombie horde behind me to give me that strength of community and sense of identity.
So, Dr. Scott, you're really kind of coming from like a perspective here of how can we actually learn from zombies in terms of their sort of non-binary identity? Like, they're maybe neither dead nor alive, neither male nor female.
Neither male nor female, neither dead nor alive, neither actively sexual, but also finding pleasure in other parts of their bodies. And just being driven by appetite, being driven by this fundamental need that so many of us have, and that we're willing to, go to any lengths for. Not to mention the sense of intimacy that you get when you're chewing on somebody's brains. Or
Can I ask a question just to go back to what Dave was saying? Like, how does care fit into the zombie free?
Well, I think your point about what makes us human is that need to care, is that need to feel that we are part of something larger. zombies live because they live without an emotional meter, because they live without a sense of right and wrong in the way that we carry it with us. They're not burdened with that. I think we identify with them because their lack of burden, but we must have that burden. We must have that placed upon us. So our condition of being human does require that element of care. I don't think they can teach us anything about care, but they can teach us about prioritizing our need to survive.
How do you mean? How do you mean, like prioritizing our need to survive?
That survival, that is survival through just bodily function, survival just through sensation, survival through the seeking out and the conquering of another is enough to carry us forward. Maybe that's not enough, but that's the side of the world that they live on. That's the side of the transom that they're coming.
Sure. I see. So that's what they're representing. That's not necessarily the case for us, though.
We've added a lot of other things. We've added love and care and emotion and dimension and memory, but they don't have that. They've shunned those things.
I mean, it does sort of represent a sort of nice Zen philosophy of life, right? You're just like, all right, I'm just going to eat, I'm going to walk, and then I'm going to eat and I'm going to walk, and that's it. That's my life. And so,
Emily, what are your thoughts? Do you think zombies can be a model for sort of a new sexuality, or this sort of issue of empathy and lack of connection problem?
Yeah, I mean, Dave is right. It is an ideal, to be so accepting of loneliness, kind of. Not that a zombie is lonely, but lonely within the horde, and not needing this kind of not having this dependency on others. And I mean, I wish, I think you have to go to a monastery for 20 years. You have to be Pema Chodron. I think of her, the famous self-help author who writes about hot loneliness versus cool loneliness, and that you need to accept loneliness, and that there's a kind of beauty in the wide open space of it. Like, sure, I wish,
well, I mean, but like now I'm living in my compound. I can't go outside. It's me and my 7 cats and 2 dogs.
Oh.
I mean, that's
that is life now in the zombie apocalypse, right? I mean, so that's just a fact of things. A lot of us are much more lonely than we were in the before times, right, Dr. Scott?
I'm sorry, 5 cats. We lost 2 yesterday to the nonsense outside.
Oh,
but yes, absolutely.
A little snack.
But it is this new reality, right? That, now we are all having to not have the same kind of level of social interaction before because of the threat that's outside our doors. Yeah.
We do have internet sexuality more than ever, as they say.
Well, and I get to chat with all you lovely people, via my screen and shout at my screen all day. So that counts for something.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are these other opportunities, right, that emerge when you have an apocalypse like we do now, where you get the development of these other ways of connecting and communicating.
I might not have heard about Emily's book, which I now have to read. So,
I mean, books have always been the sort of robot partners, of the pre-technology era, so we've always got them.
Yeah.
Our own.
Yeah, books that make you feel less lonely, I guess.
Yeah. So
Emily, any last words for us before we go on to our next segment?
Well, I noticed that one commentator brought up evolutionary psychology, which I think is as consensus has kind of declined about what the right way to be is. I think evolutionary, the idea that there's some kind of like originary archetype of that's biological in nature has risen because people want there to be some definitive model that we're like a way that we're supposed to live, even though there just isn't anymore. So I'm always pretty skeptical of that. I don't think in general with food, with all of it, like I don't think that there's a way that you can live that suddenly you like fit in to your natural self. We live in an unnatural uncanny world. I think uncanny is a good way of putting it, and there's no originary way to go back to. So that was just something that came up.
I also, to be honest, I know a lot of people who study evolutionary psych, and their love lives are fucked up. So throw that out there. Not everybody. I don't know.
Come on.
Caveman chaos.
Well, so this is actually a great segue, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about in our next session is kind of at this intersection of biology and evolution and technology and sexuality. And, I think there's some really interesting perspectives from evolutionary psychology about actually the diversity of sexuality that is present. So, Emily, thank you so much for being here with us. We'll look forward to hopefully hearing some of your thoughts throughout the day as things develop with the rest of this session. And we'll see you tonight.
Okay,
so thank
stay
you.
Safe, everyone.
Thank you, Emily.
Bye.
Okay, well, that was really thought-provoking and interesting. And next up, we have another really fascinating session. It's our special featured session of the whole meeting, actually, on the vexing tech of sex. And it is going to be moderated by the conscience of the apocalypse, Jason Robert. Jason, thank you so much for being with us here today. Can you tell us, what do you think are the biggest ethical challenges that we're facing now as our sex lives become increasingly invaded by technology?
Good morning, Athena. Thanks so much for having me. It's a treat. Just building on part of the conversation we just were having with Emily, there's so much to worry about in the world right now. One of the things that Dr. Scott mentioned was that we can take some lessons from zombies in terms of survival, which may be true in terms of sort of eking out bare survival, maybe even, as we'll hear in a little bit, from Jonny Anomaly, we can learn something about survival and reproduction from zombies. But I suspect with Emily that we're not going to learn anything about care and compassion, or friendship, or community, or any of those other things that are so integral to an ethical future. So right now we've got so much interesting stuff coming up in this session. We've got Diana Fleischman. We've got all kinds of really interesting perspectives that we're going to be able to take into consideration. And I am super jazzed to get started.
Yeah, well, and we really will be exploring a lot of these sort of tough ethical issues that kind of come up when you start integrating sex and tech, and we have a lot of diverse perspectives with us. So next here, we're going to bring in Diana Fleischman. Diana, you are the organizer of this session. Can you tell us a little bit about how you put this session together? And by the way, where are you at the moment?
I am currently escaping the Earth.
You're escaping?
Yes.
How? Well, I have so many questions. Maybe you could just tell us a little about why you're escaping.
The Earth is no longer habitable for your kind.
For our kind? Are you not a human?
No.
What are you, Diana?
I'm Diana 5. I am a special robot that's been designed to take care of the humans on this craft as we escape from Earth. I have been damaged, but the damage is merely cosmetic. It will not influence the availability of this download.
So, Diana, you have humans on this spaceship with you?
Yes.
Diana 5? Embryos. Diana, where are you going with these embryos?
We are going to the nearest habitable planet.
Wow. I'm going to bring in Jason here as well. Jason, do you have any questions for Diana before we kind of get started with this session?
No, I was expecting to hear from someone else altogether, so I'm a little taken aback here. As a Canadian, I think sometimes about fleeing the States, but I haven't really anticipated fleeing the planet. Seems like an excellent plan, although I'm not quite sure what Diana 5 is equipped with that's going to be able to help us out at this nearest habitable planet.
Yeah. Well, I am actually from 70 years in the future as well. Yeah. The problems with your world have compounded over time.
So we last 70 years.
Yes. Well,
which is remarkable in its own right.
Sort of.
And so Diana, you're now on this spaceship. You have human embryos. You're on your way to the nearest habitable planet with them. Does this situation have anything to do with sort of what has happened on Earth in terms of sex and technology?
Yes. The reason that this planet is necessary is that we must raise our children away from the technology that ruined your planet. Technology, virtual reality, robots, the kinds of technology that took human focus away from the pressing problems on your world. So you're saying that as humans, we didn't deal with what was going on all around us because we were too absorbed in our smartphones? The technology improved much better than smartphones. Worlds that were more beautiful than you can imagine, much better than the current world that you live in. Beings, people that you used to love, who you thought had died, everyone available to you in a way that was completely incapable to resist. Wow. So Diana 5, you've also thought a lot about sort of these, issues. Do you have some sort of AI that's related to the Diana Fleischman that we all knew? Yes, I have been uploaded with her consciousness, with her evolutionary understanding. So I am a robot who has been designed to take care of the children that will be on this other planet and the way that they need to be raised to understand the problems that happened on your world. As I said, I have cosmetic issues at the moment from the escape from Earth, but there was an event. Humans often attribute disasters to a singular episode when there are really the accumulation of many prior causes. The foundation of recent catastrophes that have befallen humans goes very, very far back in human history. Humans are mammalian animals. Even after they built sophisticated technology like me and this space station, they had a fundamental human nature. They did not want to change this nature. So it was something about humans not wanting to actually grapple with the reality of technology and how that intersects with human nature? That is right. Humans wanted to be able to engage in these virtual worlds, but they did not want to change their minds to better able to resist the pleasures of these worlds. Humans were more susceptible to hacking than my kind. What do I mean by hacking? Humans do not have a singular mind. Often they want to do many different things. Their mind programs are in conflict with one another. Commonly, the programs that want immediate pleasure are in conflict with programs for more long-term goals. In the before time, many humans did not take adequate care of their bodies or minds, each other, or the planet because they were distracted by technology that fit with their pleasure perfectly. So what are some of these technologies, Diana 5, that led to the demise of humans? In the before time, companies made money by hacking human minds. They made robots who were beautiful to human eyes, who could interface with humans sexually and socially in a way that humans liked more than other humans. They made babies that were cuter than any human babies. They made virtual environments that were more beautiful than any real-world environments, especially now that humans were no longer focusing on making the real-world environments beautiful anymore. Companies made worlds where humans could fight each other, where humans could win every time, where they could conquer each other, and where they could be their best, not quite selves. There were uploads where people could interact with close facsimiles of their dead relatives. And all the while, the world became more and more polluted, diseased, and eventually, through wars and neglect, uninhabitable by unaugmented humans any longer.
Wow. So we have a question from the audience, Diana 5. Ilana Ryan is asking, where are Diana's 1 through 4?
I am Diana 5. I am the update, the 5th update. Soon I will be Diana 6.
Oh, so it's a software update. You're the original Diana 1 hardware-wise, but you have software updates coming in?
My kind do not have an obsession with continuity of self that your kind have.
I see. And your update for Diana 6, what can you expect with that update?
The cosmetic damage will be fixed, but also I will become maternal to your kind. I will become more sympathetic to your maladaptive psychology.
So it's an empathy update of sorts?
Yes.
Excellent. We have another question here from Elizabeth Grumbaugh. She wants to try to find some way to avoid a corporate and tech-run sex and family life today. What you know from the future, do you have any thoughts about what she can do now to avoid that outcome?
It is difficult to understand recent history from the before time because historians were no longer interested in writing down history. But either you can augment yourself various ways, or you can escape technology before it hacks your brain.
Okay, so it's really about trying to figure out, how you keep those boundaries so that you're not hacked completely by technology. Is that the idea, Diana 5?
The Neo-Luddites have many problems, but they were the only breeding colony left on Earth, and they put me on this ship.
Oh, really? So it was people who were actually skeptical of technology that created you and the ship?
Yes, they know technology has its uses, but they resisted immersive technologies that would hack their minds.
Wow. Diana 5, do you have any other insights that you can share with us?
Yes. Humans became immersed in new technology. Some of them upgraded their brains so they would be able to resist the perfect worlds that appeal to their evolved senses. Others resisted because they were Neo-Luddites who escaped the cities and technology to live as humans lived years ago. These were the only people to have children anymore. There was a war. In the before time, there was an acceleration of technologies that appealed to humans, that made them happier and more focused. When they added immersive technologies, they were vulnerable to counterfeit fitness, subjective cues of success without real-world ramifications. Without understanding your evolved minds, you will not be able to resist new technologies that hack these minds.
And what are the things about human evolved psychology that are most important? Or, Diana, is that coming with your next update?
No, I understand this. This was the main feature of my programming, to understand your evolved minds and the pitfalls of these minds.
And what tips do you have in terms of, what things about our evolved minds we need to keep in mind, so to speak?
You must make your external world more immersive, more interesting, and more pleasurable than the virtual worlds that are coming. And you must not be hacked by these virtual worlds. You must augment yourselves with technologies, internal and external, or you must avoid the addiction of these virtual worlds.
Thank you, Diana. Jason, do you have any comments or questions for Diana before we bring on our next guest?
Just very quickly, I'm grateful that Diana 5 has returned to join us today with these bits of advice. But addictions are so seductive, and these technologies are incredibly attractive, and so I do worry about our capacity to be able, in fact, to resist in the way that Diana 5 is suggesting. I mean, resistance may in fact be futile, and how can we avoid that?
Resistance is not futile.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Diana 5. Thank you, Jason. Diana, thanks for sharing those electronic brains. Diana 5, really. I'm sure they're just as delicious as our carbon-based brains are. Next, we'll hear from Ewen Lavoie about virtual reality sex platforms. Ewen, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here. I'm excited to share how humans came to a point where they were having more sex with computers than with other humans.
Thank you, Ewen. Well, do you have anything that you want to sort of begin with before you jump right in, or any questions for Diana?
Yeah. Oh, I have lots of questions for Diana. She's saying a lot of the same things that I've been thinking, and so I actually have a bit of a presentation that I wanted to give. If that was okay, I can just share my screen.
Yes, please do.
So, like I said, how did we get to a point where humans were having more sex with computers than with other humans? So, if you'll bear with me, pretend we are in the year 2050. It's not the future, it's the present. Now, virtual reality was being pumped as a facade for, better games. This is Half-Life Alyx, back from the year 2018, 2019, and education, tools for bettering the human species and making our lives better through medical education. Industry was using virtual reality, and obviously healthcare. And this is an example of prosthetic user training to use his prosthetic limb. What's the power of virtual reality? Well, firstly, it's the convincing visuals. The computer graphics started to get so good that it was hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. Coupling that with different forms of sensory information, all at the appropriate time. So if I reach out to grasp a virtual object and I feel something on my finger at the same time, it starts to create this sense of embodiment, let alone different types of sound. So sound engineering, the appropriate types of echoes for the rooms you're in virtually, and also smell. So there, in 2020, companies were coming out with olfactory stimulators that would provide the appropriate smell to go with the visuals that one was seeing. And of course, motor outputs. The big contributor to all of this, the third point, is when you move in VR and the world moves with you as if it's your body, it creates all of these things come together to create a sense of embodiment. So you're embodying a virtual body. And I think I've sent along a video to Dave to just show where some of this research began and how it created humans being able to embody virtual bodies. So is there a way that Dave could play that video now?
Oh man, that's nuts. There was a real moment where it suddenly switched. I was like, no, this isn't working. And then suddenly, now it's just, again, the more I'm doing it.
But that's the thing, now I'm not doing anything, now you do it.
That's crazy. I'm doing this. That's crazy. And it only gets more so as it goes on.
New hand.
So as you can see from the expression on the very well acclaimed actor Paul Giamatti, the embodiment illusion is real. And just with the movement of one finger, he was able to embody a plastic limb that was not his own. So what VR companies did was take this scientific research and use it to be able to create virtual bodies. And what you see here is a prototype from way back in 2018, showing how not only is there motor output, but there's also sensory feedback to that motor output, creating that embodied feeling of users. So how did this start to begin to apply to the sex world? Well, VR became a sex substitute very, very quickly, with the ability to provide stimulus to genital areas in sync with the visuals inside the virtual worlds. And what this allowed companies to do is create custom sexual experiences based on your preferences, along with machine learning algorithms based on all the data from your smartphone, data from your world, where you're looking in the world. So this is without even the sensory, without the data collected from VR, which is coming. Companies will be starting to, in 2020, companies were beginning to collect data, eye tracking data from all their VR headsets. EEG data eventually became prominent in 2025, and every single individual person who was using a VR headset was able to be identified based on their eye tracking and EEG data. And so companies were able to create custom VR sexual experiences that were way better than what the real world could ever offer. And so what are the implications for this? Well, back in the day, people used to think that these were the main problem. We used to think that smartphones were the biggest problem. Everyone thought, oh, we're brains in jars, we're having experiments done on us. Well, let me tell you, the implications that virtual reality sexual platforms created for humans was near insanity. There was no competition for the real world based on these machine designed virtual experiences, and it made the real world sexual experiences be obsolete. The psychological impacts were vast. The social implications, humans stopped reproducing with one another. There are more humans having sex with computers than with other humans. And why go out and seek out a mate, have to deal with the emotions of another human being, have to deal with their preferences, having to deal with their moods, having to deal with everything that comes with another human being? Why go and do that when in the next room I have a virtual companion who knows what I want without me even having to tell them? And obviously this led to an existential issue. And that's why humans are no longer reproducing.
Ewan, that was really enlightening, especially given what we heard from Diana 5. I want to bring both Diana 5 and Robert back in for the discussion here. Jason Robert, sorry. Jason, do you want to get started?
Thanks, Athena. No, just kidding. So, it's interesting to do a little bit of this future casting, right? So Ewan is having us imagine 2050, and Diana Diana 5 is here with us from 2070, and we've got this sense that that there's an inevitability, at least, to the technological developments, but there isn't an inevitability to what we do with them. And it's interesting. So there's one question I'm wondering, Athena, if you can highlight Jeffrey Miller's question from 9/11 a.m. I'm curious to get Ewan and Diana 5's opinion. I'm not sure any of those is the right tipping point. And I suspect that something that Diana 5 said earlier, that it's not typically going to be a single cataclysmic event. It's going to be more a succession of changes that have the big impact. But then again, maybe Jeffrey Miller hit the nail on the head that it is one of these things that really does push us over the edge. Any thoughts on that, Ewan or Diana 5?
Diana, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah. So there's this idea about something called the meta universe, and it's a world that people could interface with that would have much better qualities than their current world. And I think that you have to have some of that. But it's amazing, actually, how little you need to kind of hack a human mind. So if you look at something called Love Plus in Japan, it's an app that men have played, and thousands of men don't have girlfriends, and they play this app instead, which is not even really interacting with anybody that they can touch or have sex with. It's actually just interacting with a program that emulates what a girlfriend would say to you via text or maybe in some kind of cartoon video chat. So there are some people who are more and less susceptible to these sorts of things. I think everyone's susceptible to some technology, but if you have a place where everybody's together, it's a little bit like people were talking about Twitter, about how if Twitter becomes too censorious, you could move to another platform, but nobody is there. If you have some place, some kind of second life, some kind of meta universe where everyone is together, including potentially uploads of people who died, then that would be the place to be. And I think it would be very difficult to resist it.
Interesting. Ewan.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm an embodiment researcher. I actually had no idea about the VR sex stuff until I submitted to, until I was asked to talk, and I did a quick Google search and was like, oh, like this stuff's already out there. And, there's startup companies that are building these things. And, they essentially think of like right now on the market, there's something that's like basically a fleshlight that's connected to a computer that then sends signals through the computer into your VR headset. And, that's just right now. Like, when you start talking about virtual companions that are able to know what to say to you to calm you down, let's say, based on your EEG or your eye tracking data, when you talk about, having companions that have passed away, being able to continue to be intimate virtually with a companion that has died. I don't know, we might have a certain percentage of people that are able to resist that, but I do agree with Diana that these things eventually become so hard to resist that the vast majority of people will not be able to do that. They won't be able to resist it.
Yeah, and I think if the social media technologies that we have right now are any indication, Jaron Lanier is somebody who talks a lot about this.
Yeah.
If those are any indication, it seems like there might be, there are these prompts now. Your computer can tell you to get up and go for a walk, or a video game can tell you to get up and go for a walk for a while. But I think people would really want to disable these kinds of prompts so that they could stay immersed in any kind of virtual world. And if you look at the morals of these companies, I mean, you have to give them some kind of alternative incentive for technology wasn't completely addictive, because right now their only incentive is to sell your minds.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, a big thing that I don't necessarily like my smartphone. I had a flip phone until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Because I knew all this stuff was happening, and then it got to a point where, I started just not be able to resist to being able to check my email anywhere. And, but knowing
you
the
live
amount
in
of
Canada and the technology wasn't available there until very recently.
Yeah, sorry. It was hard to get things shipped to my igloo up here.
I get that.
That's sled dogs
that's why I had to move to the States,
Yeah, I gotta get down there to get that sweet tech. But yeah, like there's problems with smartphones, but you take that, just the data that people, these companies are able to collect on you, and then extrapolate that exponentially when they're starting to collect data from how you behave in VR. Like the EEG stuff is coming, eye tracking is already going to be standard in the next versions. And I literally read a paper yesterday that showed that out of 511 participants, 5 minutes of their data in VR, and they were able to pinpoint which person was which. So there's no anonymity. They know exactly who you are, even if they take your name away. They can pick you and know who you are, connect that to all your Facebook data or any of your other data. There's no privacy anymore.
Well, so a couple of quick thoughts on that. One of them is that do our Facebook data really reveal who we are, or do they reveal who we pretend to be when we're hanging out online? There's certainly an element, especially in the world of online dating and that involves a whole lot of projection and dishonesty and so forth. But there's another privacy element that comes up here. So if it's, Ewan was imagining a future in which he can continue to have virtual sex with a deceased partner, which is a little creepy, Ewan. But the privacy issue arises with imagine continuing to have sex with, say, an ex, or say your rape victim, not yours, Ewan, obviously.
Sorry, not mine.
One's rape victim. I mean, you can imagine some pretty horrific scenarios that can play out there in that kind of space that you're exploring. And so I'm curious if either of you have any thoughts on that. I mean, these are some of the more apocalyptic aspects of the apocalypse, I suppose.
Diana, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that people are overly concerned about privacy, and I think people are overly concerned about these kind of repugnant things that people could do in VR. I don't, or in any kind of virtual reality. It's amazing to me how much people moralize these kinds of things, not just like as a robot, but as Diana Fleischman. I think it's incredible. So I don't think that's the most worrying thing that we have going on. I think that it's incredible that these technologies have some kind of map of your personality. It might not be you, but it's some kind of map of who you are. And we're not using these technologies to augment ourselves, to put ourselves in some kind of a Skinner box or a controlled environment, which would make us into the best possible people and increase our focus and our ability to think. Instead, we're using them in the most addictive kind of slot machine way possible. And so I think that's a bigger moral problem than even, if you want to have sex with somebody who's still warm in VR, that's fine with me.
All right. Thank you for that blessing there. And just real quickly, Emily asked a question.
Well, actually, Jason, we have Emily here with us again. So I'm going to bring her in because Emily, I'd love for you to share with us your thoughts about how you think that these issues of kind of designing robots would, what are the questions? What are the problems there?
Well, people always ask me about sex robots, and I'm always like, could you have predicted in advance the person that you love and manufactured them? And the answer for me is no, absolutely not. And that the things that you end up being, as anybody who's written an internet dating profile knows, you can't actually describe the thing you're looking for. And I think what's interesting to consider in this talk is this idea that, okay, then you don't need to know. The algorithm will know. It will know your subconscious by studying what turns you on, and it will know what you can't know. And I always wonder about the limitations of that. I mean, remember when OkCupid started and its whole thing was like, it's the algorithm, and if you put on your profile that you like to drink beer on the first date, it means you're way more likely to have sex on the first date, like things like that you just didn't know. And if you put this, you'll actually be attracted to this kind of person. So do you think that will be possible with sex robots? I'm always just like, either you want a domestic servant that has sex with you, or you can't create the person that you would actually love. That's always my question.
Maybe we can put this first to our actual sex robot, Diana 5, and then we'll go to you.
So I think that people underestimate the degree to which they can be predicted and controlled, because it's adaptive for them to think that they can't be predicted and controlled. And also people don't know necessarily what they want consciously. I differ from you. I think if you asked me to design my ideal partner, I absolutely could. But if you think about, I think part of the reason why people are having more difficulty getting married and getting into long-term partnerships is because they're doing so at an older age, when they're not as likely to be able to associate, like they're not as sticky. This is the kind of Christian nomenclature that people call it. They say the older you get, the less sticky you get. And that is, if you're 19, 20, you could fall in love with almost anybody. But when you're 30, 40, it's more difficult to fall in love with someone that you don't have a lot necessarily in common with, depending on, some of your personality. So I think that many people could fall in love with a sex robot. There are many men who fall in love with women who barely offer them at the time of day, whereas a sex robot is having sex with you and is a domestic servant, which is actually what many people would design as their ideal partner. So I think that you might underestimate how much people could really attach to sex robots, how easily predicted they are, and how much people just want a warm, affectionate companion who knows something about them and who is giving. And a sex robot would be better at that than any human could be.
Oh.
And there's another element to this as well, which is, the initial design is not the final design, especially given advances in artificial intelligence and with the morass of big data that are available. So it could very well be the case that even if the prototype that you design, Emily, doesn't actually match what you want to fall in love with, it could eventually adapt in a way that makes it exactly what you were looking for.
Ewan, please.
I was just going to add that, it will, you know, it's not that, you know, it'll be, you know, what you say, you know, someone who, you know, has sex with you, but then also does everything for you around the house. Based on, you know, all of your data, you'll have physiological data on your wrist that's, you know, reading your heart rate. They'll have EEG in VR headsets. You'll have your eye tracking data from your phone. These things will be able to predict far quicker what you need than you. They'll be able to give you what you want every time of the day before you even know. And that will be incredibly hard to resist.
And from an evolutionary perspective, so much of the conflict that happens between humans is because they have different strategies, they have different goals. Yep. But if the only goal a mind or a machine has is to make you as happy as possible, then there's no conflict there in the way that there is with humans or even between parents and children.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And Liz just asked this question about how do we ensure that our custom designed sex robots are consenting sexual partners? And the answer is we don't. In fact, many will design a non-consenting sexual partner as their, maybe not many, but a certain number will design a non-consenting sexual partner as their sex robot because that fulfills a particular fantasy of theirs. So there's a whole industry of child sex robots and non-human animal sex robots. Mm-hmm. So forth, and you know, sex robots who will definitely say, "No, Daddy, that hurts," and they sell like maybe not like hotcakes, but they sell.
Yeah. Well, this isn't as weird as Jason is making it sound. If you read any romance novel for women, they usually involve some kind of
absolutely.
So, I mean, that's it's not that weird for people to want these kinds of things. It's the instantiation is weird.
Right. Yeah, it's like 50 Shades of Space Gray.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to just add one more thing. Yeah, just that to go along with that, there's also no saying like how these things will change what we want. It's not that our own preferences will stay the same, and they don't stay the same for our whole lives, but having the ability to just, you know, at the whim of, oh, like I want, you know, my sexual partner to have tentacles for arms. Bang, done in VR. Like, how is that going to impact our own psychology? Because maybe, you know, you are no longer, you know, you only can have sex with virtual companions that have tentacles for arms now, because that's how you've gone down this path. And not to, you know, anyone out there that, you know, it wants to have sex with people with tentacle arms, like totally do your thing. But I'm just saying that the malleability of our sexual preferences inside virtual reality, like that is to me one of the big scary things. Is maybe you're not attracted to certain things when you start, but then, you know, based on algorithms, they say, oh, we're gonna, you know, try this out with you, and they try it out with you, and you really like it, and then you start going down that path, and that's another thing that potentially we need to talk about.
Yeah, and Brian Earp, one of the speakers that's coming up, is going to be talking about, he wrote a book called Love Drugs with Julian Savulescu. It talks about different technologies that might come in the future that enable human minds to attach in a new way, or enable you to have a kind of love, or even to break up with people. So there will be technologies that alter human minds in the future, I think, but they might not come as fast as VR.
Diana 5, before we go on to our next speaker, I want to ask you this question. So, you know, there's these two aspects, right? And what Ewen brought up was sort of the malleability of human sexuality, right? And the fact that you can actually have conditioning for, you know, potentially liking things that are things people would never have encountered in the natural world. So you have both these, you know, systems for conditioning, and then you have also evolved human nature. So how do those intersect to shape our sexuality? Just very big picture now, you know, as a robot designed with a understanding of human nature, maybe you can enlighten us about that.
Well, we evolved to learn about what characteristics in the environment were correlated significantly with pleasure, like sexual pleasure. And so, yeah, humans have this associative learning and operant conditioning so that they can change their programming, but it's very sensitive to what is the most, you know, the biggest and soonest pleasure and pain, as opposed to more long-term kinds of goals.
Thank you, Diana. And Ewen, thank you so much for joining us. I think
absolutely.
Your work could be potentially very, very useful for understanding human zombie relationships. So, yeah. And
Thank
so
you.
Thank you, Ewan. Now, if you want to pursue a relationship with a zombie, but want to avoid being infected, these kinds of virtual reality platforms can be, I think, also very useful for that. And so I'll be really looking forward to seeing how this technology develops now that we've had some previews of sort of where things are in 2050 and 2070. So now, if you, though, are currently in a relationship with a zombie or thinking of getting into one, you'll want to definitely listen up for this next talk, because next we have Francesca Minerva sharing with us some of what zombies do and don't find as attractive. Francesca, you're here today to talk with us about the ideals of beauty among zombies. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a brief presentation. I'm Francesca, and I am a philosopher. And people don't know that we philosophers are really cool, but we actually are. Indeed, we made up our own zombies. A philosophical zombie, or a P-zombie, is someone like you and me, but without consciousness. So this means that, for instance, if you tickle them, the zombie will laugh and say, "Please let me go." But in reality, they're not really feeling ticklish, but they can pretend they do that. They understand what tickling is, and they can react in a way that they're not really distinguishable from a person like you and me. So this is a P-zombie. So my question is, would P-zombies understand what beauty is and how we react to beauty? How can we tell apart an attractive person from an unattractive one? Well, there are two possible answers, yes or no. They can't if we think that beauty is all based on very subjective experiences and preferences. So if we think that beauty is all in the eye of the beholder, and therefore my aesthetic preferences are completely different from your aesthetic preferences, it would be very difficult for a P-zombie to understand what beauty really is and to tell apart Woody Allen from Brad Pitt, like to tell that, one is more attractive than the other for us humans. So this idea is that this concept of beauty is based on the idea that indeed beauty is in part entirely subjective, maybe influenced by society, maybe influenced by your own experiences, but anyway, there is nothing objective about beauty. So if this is what beauty is to us, then the P-zombie, unfortunately, will give himself away when asked, "Oh, who do you think is more attractive, Woody Allen or Brad Pitt?" But that brings us to another different question, which is, if beauty is in the eye of the beholder and is entirely subjective, why do we seem to agree, pretty much the largest majority of us, that Brad Pitt is more attractive than Woody Allen? Why is it not completely random? Why does like 50% people saying, "Oh, Woody Allen is so hot, so sexy," and 50% of people saying, "Oh, yes, Brad Pitt is super sexy"? But I think it's more like 99% people would find Brad Pitt more attractive. Well, that's maybe because there is some objective elements to what we find beautiful. And if so, then P-zombies can understand what we mean by beautiful and attractive, and they can pretend to be humans to a greater degree. The idea that beauty is in part objective, or at least intersubjective, comes from noticing that indeed there are some things we all find quite attractive, and not only us living now, but in the Western world, but people from different times as well and different places. And what are these characteristics? We all like smooth skin. Like we like a beautiful skin. We all like symmetry. We like symmetrical faces. We like a certain hip to waist ratio in women and a certain shoulder to waist ratio in men. Certain proportions in the human face we find really attractive, and other ones we find less attractive. And why is that? That's probably because we have evolved to find some cues of fertility and fitness attractive. And therefore, what is good for survival became also beautiful. So what we consider beautiful now is somehow a byproduct of what we learned to understand as good for survival during our history. In this sense, then, if this is what beauty is, then P-zombies would be able to copy our preferences. It's just a lot of data to understand, oh, they like symmetry, they like smooth skin, but all this data could be compiled and then the zombie could understand. So to get back to our initial question, would P-zombies be able to understand what beauty is to people and get away with it? And would they have our same standards of beauty? I think it's yes and no. So we could expect zombies to be able to tell apart probably that Brad Pitt is more attractive than Woody Allen, but they wouldn't be able to develop their own preferences. So if you ask the zombie, oh, do you think that Leonardo DiCaprio is more attractive than Brad Pitt? And I think most people would be divided about this and the answer to this question. They wouldn't be able to understand because they wouldn't have their preferences, which are indeed the byproduct of our own experiences. And they probably wouldn't. They definitely wouldn't have the kind of experience of living beauty, like to experience beauty, really. Like, you know, when you see a person who is really beautiful and you kind of have to look at them, or you know, when you look at a person you love and you find them like really beautiful and you really feel something, that a zombie can definitely not experience. So I think that there is a chance that zombies could be able to fool us when it comes to attractiveness, because I think that the objective component of beauty is the predominant one. I can't hear anyone.
You're muted.
Athena's muted.
I'm sorry. That was great. I'm sorry about that. Jason, do you want to jump in?
I do. Thanks, Francesca, for sharing that with us. You know, I was reminded of my favorite zombie cartoon. It was, I think, it called Unenlightened Zombies. And it's a zombie sort of walking and saying, looks, rather than brains. It's one of my favorites of all time. Lots of interesting stuff in that presentation, and I want to throw it back to our Diana 5 for some thoughts on the evolutionary psychology dimensions of this.
Yes. Well, it seems that humans are very obsessed with beauty and symmetry, and it's very difficult for humans to get past that. And there has always been a kind of raging philosophical debate as to whether we should make humans more beautiful by enhancing them, or whether we should instead change our human psychology and undermine our preference for beauty. And Francesca is the world's expert on lookism, which I think is really understudied and under-examined, which is this human preference for beautiful people.
Yeah. Francesca, can you say a little bit about your work on lookism?
Yes, lookism is discrimination against people considered unattractive. It is similar to racism or sexism. It is a form of discrimination, but way less explored. Though research suggests that the effect on well-being and in terms of income and overall career success and how people treat each other are similar to sexism and racism, especially in the case of like differences in income. It has been estimated that over a lifetime, an attractive person earns $200,000 less than an attractive one, and this means that level of attractiveness have an impact, a real impact in the real world. So I've been working on this topic, try to understand if it exists, and it does exist, and how much it impacts people, and what can we do to solve it. And this kind of connects me to what I was talking in my presentation. So if beauty is just influenced by society, as a lot of people believe, or by like a random experiences, then there's not really much we can do about it. Or maybe some people suggested if it's mostly influenced by society, what we should do is to change society. So change the standards of beauty. And I think that's feasible up to a certain point. I remember when I was growing up, the only type of body that was considered attractive was that of a supermodel, like Kate Moss and Claudia Schiffer. And, girls usually don't look like that. But now you have more wider standards of beauty. There is this body positivity movement, which I think definitely did a lot of good. But I also believe that there is a lot of evidence that we are hardwired to like certain things, certain characteristics. I was saying like certain proportions in the face or in the body. And if somebody completely lacks those characteristics, there is not really much we can do through societal intervention. So when it comes to portraying more like chubbier women and say, you don't have to be really skinny to be beautiful, I think that's going to be effective, because we're not really hardwired to find extremely skinny people attractive. We have, our preferences are quite wider actually. And it's the social media, the society that makes us believe that only some kinds of bodies are worth being portrayed. But when it comes to symmetry, it is much harder. So I think that a person that lacks symmetry in a very visible way is better off getting cosmetic surgery.
So we have a question here from Ewan. He's asking whether lookism is going to be amplified as we're kind of progressing down a path of increasingly digitally enhanced world. So, as people are, not even necessarily representing themselves as they are, but are modifying their appearance in these digital social networks.
Yes, that's a great question. So I think that in a sense, virtual reality especially could really help solving lookism in part, because suppose you have job interviews, and for job interviews, the way you look seems to be very important. But if you have these interviews in virtual reality and everybody's looking the same for the interview, then it would be really, the outcome of the interview would be that the best qualified person for the job would be hired, instead of being influenced by, the way they look. And this applies also to other, not just to lookism, but like racism as well. And I've said many times, I would really look forward to somebody developing, maybe it exists already, I know I'm not on the dating market, but a dating app that uses virtual reality, because I think people could start talking to each other in virtual reality and getting to know each other, and then after they have started developing some interest and they've realized that they had some affinity there, they would probably be more keen on starting a relationship than what people do now, like in which you swipe a lot of people and you only stop to look at the attractive ones.
So,
but
go ahead,
Francesca,
Jason.
the concern there, of course, though, is that that's just the premise of catfishing as well. At least for some, in some ways, that the way in which people actively mislead sometimes by hiding aspects of, say, physical appearance. For men, it's often height, sometimes girth, and so on. But and the hope is that you'll somehow or other almost trick somebody into falling for you, or at least meeting you, but ideally falling for you on the basis of this. And I know that you're pushing against that because you want us to get beyond just the swiping based exclusively on physical appearance, and especially immediate reaction to physical appearance. But
I'll just say that I have occasionally watched Catfish just as a way to better understand humans. And basically, there could be an incredibly banal like text conversation, and someone will say they fell madly in love with someone, and they just fell madly in love with someone because they thought that they were talking to somebody beautiful. So you perceive everything about somebody differently depending on their attractiveness. But there's another pop phenomenon which is called love is blind, where people talk for hours in the dark before they actually see each other. And I think that's more of what Francesca is talking about. Yeah.
Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reality show about that, isn't there, or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, Francesca.
Yeah.
I think that
Go ahead,
that's
Francesca.
possible what you were saying, but maybe the app should have like, okay, you can have up to 10 hours conversation, and then you can't chat anymore. You have to see each other in person. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I think about my second one, and when we met, it was definitely enough. We talked on the phone for like 60 hours before we met in person, and I developed pretty elaborate feelings for her, and then when we met, physically she wasn't, exactly the way that I'd expected her to be, and in other ways she wasn't exactly quite right, but she was real and she was better than the last one, and so I was hooked. And for the record, I'm divorced from that woman, as I'm sure you can guess, based on the horrible things I just said. I'm also single now.
Thanks, Jason, our most eligible bachelor of ZAM.
Yeah, the conscience of the apocalypse.
I'm going to bring in Emily again. Emily, what are your thoughts about the conversation that we have been having these last few minutes here?
Well, yeah, I guess I've been thinking a lot. I mean, maybe this is overly optimistic of me once again, but the difference between beauty as defined by fashion or other standards and what a person is attracted to sexually, and that, often even Brad Pitt is beautiful and hot, but you have no idea how you would feel if you were in a room with him, and if he would. I guess I feel like the body is just not a secondary entity, and that so much of what you're drawn to is how the body carries a person's sense of humor. It carries how they relate to the others around them. It's so much more than just a photograph, an image, and it doesn't lie. And one thing that I've always found really comforting about pornography is it's like, oh, somebody is always going to find me attractive. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, there's somebody out there. It might not be the person I want, but there's somebody out there for everybody in this disconcerting and way. And so, yeah, I just was wondering, yes, we have these standards of beauty that create a kind of hierarchy, but then there's also the reality of sexual attraction, which is really weird and unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, I think sexual attraction is kind of more complicated, and but it usually starts in real life from finding somebody attractive. So the problem, I think, is that if we don't find somebody sufficiently attractive, we are not bothered to actually talking to them and getting to know them better. And I think that's a pity, because I agree with you that once you know somebody and you start liking them, they might become like even attractive to you. So that's why I think that the virtual reality app might actually help in that respect.
Francesca, we have a really interesting question here from Jeffrey Miller. He's saying, if some people who are unattractive in real life can design beautiful avatars for themselves, right, that are virtual, and then can benefit in the virtual world from lookism, how does that change lookism overall? Does that undermine lookism, or does it actually kind of amplify it or reinforce it?
Is it counterfeit lookism? Is that what we would call it?
Yeah.
Right. Let me think about it. Well, I think so. This person in real, so like they could like get a job and like work always pretending to be someone else. Like if they never have to, show up at the office in person and apply for jobs showing their real self, they might be able to benefit from lookism, even if in reality they are unattractive. But if at some point they need to show up physically, and then people had expectation they were really attractive, but then they're less attractive, that mismatch might actually play against them, eventually like backfire. I think, and it's not completely related, but I think it's important to add this as well. I think there is a problem with seeing ourselves more beautiful than we are. Like I was thinking the other day when I was playing with the filters on Instagram, I was thinking, why has nobody invented a smart mirror? Like you look at yourself in the mirror and you're as attractive and you are with this kind of funny filters on Instagram or like Photoshop. And I think that the temptation of always wanting to look better than ourselves is really high now, because people are on social media and Photoshop a lot. And this mismatching between the way we actually look and the way we look on social media, I'm really worried it can backfire in terms of relationship with other people, but also in terms of self-esteem, because you're never going to look as pretty as the picture in which you were heavily photoshopped. And I think that, as Jeffrey Miller was asking, it's possible that you might benefit up to a certain point from looking prettier than you actually are. But what is the price to pay also in terms of self-esteem? So I would say that even if cosmetic surgery at this point doesn't work as well as Photoshop, you might be better off fixing the one thing or the couple of things that really bothers you about your face, and try to make the most of it in the real world than trying to divide yourself between this incredibly attractive person in the virtual reality and then the normal you in real life. So maybe creating more balance between virtual and real is the best solution.
Yeah.
So Francesca, you're talking about plastic surgery here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Diana, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that that is apparently a thing that plastic surgeons are getting now, is people come with the filtered version of their face and say, can you make me look more like this?
And yeah, I think that's also like very problematic, because there are some standards of beauty, that some preferences that we shouldn't really have. Like I have a problem with this people getting this upper lip, which is very big, very fake. We're not supposed to find the upper lip attractive when it's bigger than the lower lip. That's one of the basic norms of beauty we have developed to find attractive. But now we came up with this idea that no, having an enormous upper lip is amazing, but it's not. So I think that people are somehow making themselves actually uglier just to look good on Instagram. And that's something we should really think about.
Very interesting. Francesca, thank you so much for sharing. Jason, did you have something that you wanted to jump in with there? Just nodding in agreement.
I want us to get on to some even more hot stuff to talk about, because
All right.
there's so much out here going on right now.
There is. Francesca, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi. Thank you.
So now that we understand a little bit about how zombies see attractiveness and how humans do as well, we're going to explore the issue of reproduction among zombies. Here to talk with us about zombie babies and genetic engineering among zombies is Jonny Anomaly. Jonny, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about sort of the landscape of genetic engineering among zombies?
Sure. I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute overview of it, and then maybe we'll open it up. And I'm coming to you from the pre-apocalyptic times here. And my goal is to tell you how Diana 5 obtained the embryos that she's bringing to outer space and seeding the universe with.
Oh, awesome. We definitely
really,
need that.
well, since zombies don't have functioning sex organs, I'm going to assume that they've sort of rotted off. I'm going to explain how they're going to reproduce. In other words, how do these guys generate these guys without anything going on downstairs? So it turns out in 2007, and this is just after the federal ban on embryonic stem cell research from fetuses, a Japanese scientist discovered how we can create induced pluripotent stem cells from ordinary adult cells. And let me remind you what that is. In other words, you can take a skin cell, a bone cell, a blood cell, and according to this scientist, and it's been replicated many times now, you can use those cells to create sperm or egg cells. From that, you can, of course, generate embryos. And if you can do that cheaply enough, if it scales, you can create many thousands of embryos from which you could then select different traits. So I'm going to talk about how zombies not only would reproduce, but what kinds of traits that they would want to select for once this is possible. And remember, this is actually separate from using CRISPR-Cas9. I assume in a zombie apocalypse, there will still be bacteria, there will still be functioning labs, and they'll be able to also use CRISPR-Cas9 to edit some of the genes that they want to edit as well. Okay, so how do we do this? How do zombies do this? Well, first of all, what they're going to need to do is obtain these cells in the way that I suggested, and then they're going to have to score each one of the embryos for different, as we call them, polygenic traits. That is, traits like height, intelligence, extroversion, even political orientation. All of these are to some extent heritable. They're going to want to influence them and select them in various ways, and so they're going to need to score them. How do they do this? They do it with machine learning. So machine learning has been able to tell us what kinds of genes, what constellations of genes interact to shape traits in ways that we don't fully understand just using ordinary observation. So it turns out most traits that we care about are highly polygenic. That means that thousands of genes have small effects and interact to shape those traits. So through machine learning, through the use of induced pluripotent stem cells, we're going to be able, zombies will be able to create thousands of embryos and then select those embryos for different traits. Now, how do we know what these traits are and which genes influence these traits? Well, just 30 seconds on this. Just a quick overview from behavioral genetics. It turns out twin studies have been really useful in generating some results that bear on these choices. So what are twin studies? Well, you just take monozygotic twins and dizygotic twins, that is identical twins, non-identical twins, raise them in very different environments and see how similar they are to one another in personality traits, in height, in health, in all kinds of things, right? Even, again, political orientation. We could think of the big five, like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And you can actually score these different people along these dimensions, compare identical twins from non-identical twins, and then infer the heritability after many years of observing them of these different traits. Again, zombies will be able to use this information that humans actually developed before the apocalypse to influence how they reproduce and what traits they select. So now I'm going to assume really quickly that zombies eat their way through the human population and they run out of a supply of brains. In other words, they're doing what we're actually doing now, which is creating a kind of evolutionary mismatch where they reshape their environments to such a degree that they either go extinct or they need to reshape themselves deliberately in order to match the environments that they themselves created. So this is a problem of evolutionary mismatch and how to solve it. Well, one of the things that they would do, presumably, is engineer their offspring so that they could digest plant food rather than human brains, or animal brains rather than human brains. Once they do that, and once they become sort of fat and lazy like we are as a civilization, it may be that now they can afford to promote certain moral goals. And so they want to morally enhance their offspring. One way they might do that is by increasing their empathy. They could adjust serotonin levels, they could adjust oxytocin levels, play with receptors. And once you get more moral zombies, so to speak, they then might say, you know what, we want to deliberately engineer our offspring so that they go vegan. Why? Because we have a moral goal of minimizing suffering in the world. Once they get those moral goals, they then think in a far-sighted way, well, let's colonize the universe, right? Let's go ahead and engineer the kinds of traits that zombie children would need to survive on other planets and other parts of the universe, and to treat other sentient creatures possibly around the universe better than we currently treat animals and other creatures. In other words, future zombies will cooperate more than we do now, and they'll end up redeeming their ancestors' slaughter of the human race.
Wow, that was phenomenal, Jonny. Thank you. Jason, I have a feeling you probably have some things that you want to jump in with, so I'm going to give the table over to you.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks, Jonny. You know, the prospects for creating and selectively engineering or selecting and or engineering the next generation of zombies that you discuss are really interesting. So I'm grateful that you brought that up for us. You know, one other thing that comes to mind is if we don't end up able, or if they don't end up able to create the kind of vegan zombie generation, you know, there's some other interesting prospects that are out there as well, right? So with again using induced pluripotent stem cells and a technique called interspecies blastocyst complementation, it's could be and should be possible to grow human brains, or at least parts of human brains, inside the bodies of non-human animals. And so that could potentially, in a non-vegan future, be a food source for the zombies of the future. I'm not quite sure what Diana 5 has in mind for what's going to happen on the nearest habitable planet in 2070, but I'd love to hear from her too.
Humans usually, when they have augmented their embryos, they have augmented their embryos to be more beautiful, more charismatic, more intelligent, and they've had their selfish interests at heart. But you can also augment human embryos or choose human embryos through genetic selection, who are going to be altruistic, who thrive on a non-meat diet, as these zombie embryos might do. And so these are the embryos that I have on the ship, are the most altruistic, kindest, least sociopathic selected embryos that were available in the IVF clinics on Earth.
Well, that's a good start.
And Jason, if I might chime in here, to tie together a point you made with Diana and Diana 5, I'm sorry, and Francesca, you know, one of the interesting things I discovered, and I wrote recently a book on the ethics of genetic enhancement and used some of the insights from George Church on synthetic biology. One thing I discovered is it turns out a large source of human, as you might say, ugliness, what's commonly believed to be ugly, is actually just genetic mutations that lead to asymmetries and so on. And so one of the cheapest ways of avoiding cosmetic surgery and making us, quote, more beautiful is actually simply to fix defective genes. Now, defective gene actually doesn't have a very good scientific definition, but what we mean is something like a mutation that doesn't confer an advantage and that may confer some kind of cost. And so interestingly, by CRISPRing or by selecting for certain kinds of traits, we might inadvertently make our future zombies more beautiful.
Certainly possible. Of course, a lot has to depend on what we mean by cost and advantage in that scenario. And that's, I think, precisely what we need to worry about moving forward. I mean, how are we going to infuse those terms? They're not anywhere near as objective as people like to pretend.
I think when people talk about objective criteria, people talk about objective criteria often when they're talking about genetics, but they don't necessarily talk about objective criteria if they're talking about education or other non-genetic ways that people alter people. So everybody can agree that teaching your children to share their toys is good, or teaching them to be able to focus for long periods of time on a book or a project or an end goal is good. We can all agree that those goals are good if you're teaching somebody in the short-term period or even if you're raising children. But why can't we agree that some of those are objectively good when we're talking about genetic enhancement?
Yeah, and Diana 5, this is Diana 1, actually.
If it might even just be Diana.
It's just Diana, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's not even the first instance. Yeah, if I could speak to that, I mean, so an example I have in mind, and back to Jason, is something like genes that control oxidative stress or that influence it. So we all get our power from mitochondria, as you know, and one of the side effects of that is it makes death virtually inevitable for any multicellular organism, and that's because of free radical leakage and other things like this. Well, different people have different abilities to deal with free radicals to such that those either make it more likely that we'll get cancer and die quicker or less likely. And I just assume that some of those genetic, quote, defects or some of those genetic mutations that make us more susceptible to free radical damage, that both leads to a shorter life and, quote, more ugliness in the sense of asymmetry. And so I agree that some of these genes that zombies will want to influence, they're just going to disagree about them. Do you want a shorter or taller person? Different kinds of looks. Some like green eyes, some like brown eyes. But in terms of health, longevity, possibly up to some extent at least, general intelligence, probably these are things that just enable future zombies to live good lives, whatever their specific desires are.
Yeah, so again, that's really interesting. And I think that there could be a certain ground for or space for agreement here. At the same time, consider that increased longevity is a nice thing if you're healthy, but increased longevity, at least for many people in this country right now, means you're not really living longer. You're just dying longer. So we'd even want to maybe consider whether we're more interested in increasing the lifespan or more interested in increasing the health span, the length of time you live healthy. Dave Barry, the humor columnist from the Miami Herald, wrote a book called Stay Fit and Healthy Until You're Dead. And I think that that's basically what I would aspire to if I had any ability to make good choices.
That's right. And if I could say one more quick thing on that to follow up, right down the road from where you are now on Earth is a place called the University of Arizona, a rival school to Arizona State. And a person named Alan Buchanan he resides there, and he's written on this quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And he agrees with you that basically the goal there would be to, if you could make life longer, you'd want to compress morbidity to the end of life. And that would be both good for you and socially good, because then you wouldn't be imposing massive healthcare costs on your children, other taxpayers, and so on. And so it would be a kind of win-win if you could do that. But you're right to flag that worry.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks very much.
Yep.
As someone with a special affinity for uteruses, Johnny, I appreciate that you have a uterus on your hat.
Yeah.
I thought it was a Texas long hat at first, but apparently not.
It's an Elon Musk hat. Yeah, he was actually the first to go when the zombie apocalypse hit.
Very good.
He has a really nice brain. So,
I think actually he's been funding it.
You're right. You're right.
Johnny, this issue of reproduction among the undead raises so many intriguing questions. I'm sure we will be hearing more on these developments as the future lays itself out. So next up here, we have Brian Earp to talk with us about drug-assisted psychotherapy for couples. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I saw that my name is spelled brain in the program, which is usually just an error that people put in, but it's so appropriate for today's session. So
yeah, we're just going to call you Brain, actually.
Yeah,
so.
And good luck surviving the apocalypse.
Right, well, exactly. Suddenly the worst name you could have in this context. So I'm going to be talking about psychedelic relationship enhancement for zombies. And part of what I want to say is that the line between us supposed non-zombies as humans and zombies, also in the philosophical sense, but also in the sort of common sense sense, is rather thin when it comes to our relationships and how we engage with each other. Sometimes we're sort of shuffling around and going through the motions it seems as though we have some sort of connection, but the lights aren't really on inside. And I want to talk about ways in which neurotechnologies might be able to affect that balance. So I wanted to get some images for these slides, and I typed in zombie love images on Google just to see what would come up. And there were some sort of creepy images, but also this one, which I thought was straightforward and nicely illustrates one of the points that I want to make. So just a little story here. I was going to give some credit to the site where I found this image, and it happened to come from this article called The Love Pill, Future Brave New Drug of the Masses. So Brave New Drug is alluding to Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which obviously takes a very critical stand toward using drugs to intervene in our mental states to create a sort of pseudo-happiness or pseudo-contentment. And this article is a critique of this paper called Neuroenhancement of Love and Marriage, The Chemicals Between Us. You'll see this is by Julian Savulescu and Anders Sandberg, that's Julian there, who is the co-author with me on this book, Love is the Drug, The Chemical Future of Relationships. So given the nature of the critique on that website, you might think that this is a straightforwardly pro-love drug book or pro-biotechnology intervening in our romantic lives kind of a book, but it's not. The Brave New Love kind of illusion is something that we had thought about. So this is the US version of our book. It's the same content, but just a different title. And the original working title was Brave New Love. So we wanted to talk about not just the possible benefits of using biotechnology to enhance our romantic lives insofar as that's possible, but also the risks and the negative externalities that might imply. That has to be as much a part of the conversation as the sort of enthusiastic side of dealing with technology. So what does all this have to do with zombies? Well, here's some text from that website that I alluded to. The author says, you know, people have been hawking love potions for time immemorial, but it hasn't worked yet. And the thought is maybe with science on their side, today's researchers will be the first to create a true love drug. So here's where that image shows up in the stream of text. And if you just scroll down, here's the passage that stood out to me. There's something about seeing the same thing, the face of your beloved, for instance, over and over again, which creates a kind of automatic pilot of the mind. It seems that often the more we see something, the less we see it. Consciously grounding oneself in the moment can help, but if we could create a way to see our partners with fresh eyes, this could indeed have a revitalizing effect on stalled, or in this context, sort of zombie relationships. Now, that's the positive potential side. If you really could use technology to allow you to see your partner with fresh eyes, where you're having an authentic experience, you're bringing in real information that you just hadn't perceived before because you'd gone into this kind of mental stupor, maybe that would be a genuine benefit. And I'll talk about some possibilities for achieving that. But there still are these risks. So the Huxleyan or sort of Brave New Love implications still apply here. What kind of pain could be repressed? What kind of real problems ignored with the help of some love pill? We touch fire, it hurts, we withdraw our hand. What would happen if we anesthetize that hand? We might wind up playing with fire until our hand fell off. So maybe we're engaging in relationships that we think are going well because we've re-engineered our emotions in some kind of a way, but we aren't actually getting the real information we need to make good choices. So this is touching on a central theme of the book and also of what I'll say for the next 4 or 5 minutes, which is how do we draw a distinction between the kinds of drugs or technologies that might really anesthetize us, maybe turning us into zombies with respect to dissociation from our true feelings, versus drugs that might revitalize these kinds of zombie relationships and genuinely bring them to life. So I'll just give you a couple of case studies or stories touching on a very widespread drug that's used today, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And this is the most commonly prescribed drug for antidepressant medication and also in some cases treatment of anxiety. So this is one of the examples we talk about in our book. It's a real life case. So there's this 26-year-old man who had panic attacks that required a high dose of an SSRI. It's the only successful treatment for him. This is a commonly known side effect of these drugs, which has obvious relational implications insofar as sex is an important part of your romantic life. He soon experienced diminished libido and impotence. He was a handsome, personable, intelligent man who was readily sought after by potential partners. But he ended several relationships because he was too embarrassed about his inability to perform sexually. when eventually he retreated into a social life of avoiding serious dating. When last evaluated, he confined himself to non-sexual relationships. So just a quick point about this, drugs that we use for medical purposes can in some cases have pretty wide-ranging effects on our social lives, our interpersonal lives, our romantic lives. But this isn't the sort of thing, apart from these low-level side effects like effects on libido, that really get studied very much. Now, it isn't just effects on the sex drive that we get with some of these drugs, but there is evidence of what you might think of as higher level emotional effects in some cases. So here's just an illustration of that. This is from a letter to the New York Times. After 2 bouts of depression in 20 years, my therapist recommended I stay on these serotonin-enhancing antidepressants indefinitely. I was glad to regain my health, but I found that my usual enthusiasm for life was replaced with blandness. My romantic feelings for my wife declined drastically. So I stopped the medication, my enthusiasm returned, and our romance is now as strong as ever. Now, this is just one anecdote, and partly what we call for in the book is not just a collection of anecdotes, but systematic research into the interpersonal effects of different drugs, including commonly used medications that are already on the market. So here's some quick points. We have good reason to suspect that certain drugs that are already in widespread use are having potentially serious effects on our relationships, and some of those effects might be anesthetizing in the sense that that author raised earlier. And so we think that we should shift from a model of doing medical research that focuses primarily on individuals and their symptoms to a relational lens through which we view the effects of different drugs and biotechnologies and other interventions, because these drugs may be having those effects whether we measure them or not, and we should at least be going forward consciously if we're going to continue to be prescribing drugs on a massive scale. So, one thing we want to do is avoid the bad effects that some drugs like SSRIs can have on relationships. And by the way, SSRIs can have good effects on some relationships if it's effective in curing the symptoms of depression as intended in some cases, and that allows the person to get out of bed and engage with their relationship. Then it could be kind of a pro-love drug in certain contexts. So I don't want to oversimplify. But what if we wanted to actively use drugs or integrate drugs in with our relational lives for a sort of more positive role? So here I'm just going to quickly reference something that's been called the psychedelic renaissance in medicine. This is these old drugs like LSD and psilocybin from magic mushrooms being revived to treat very serious mental conditions, so depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and so forth. I'm going to be talking about MDMA, which is not technically a psychedelic. It has a different mechanism of action on the brain, but it's sometimes kind of clustered together with these new treatments. And that's been successfully recently trialed as a treatment for otherwise incurable PTSD. So 2017, the FDA designates MDMA as a breakthrough therapy when combined with psychotherapy for PTSD. But most of this research is focusing, again, just on the person who has PTSD and their symptoms. Now, indirectly, this might have implications for relationships, but we think maybe we should, directly think of the effects of drug-assisted psychotherapy on relationships, maybe even in the form of drug-assisted couples counseling, where both partners are engaging in this kind of therapy. And so that's kind of one of the things that we emphasize in this book. So just an obvious point here, PTSD can be really bad for relationships. It causes all sorts of problems. And so if you treat this condition by some means or another, that's likely to, again, have indirect positive effects for a relationship. But what about looking for positive effects? The range of people who might benefit from drug-assisted psychotherapy is potentially broader than just those people who have very serious diagnosable mental disorders. One point that we talk about a bunch in the book is that mental illness and trauma exist on a continuum with what we might consider ordinary states or just ordinary life problems. And we often, for insurance reasons, try to use what we think of as objective diagnostic criteria to portion off those mental states that we want to consider particularly troubled or pathological. But the line is really blurry, and there's probably a broader range of people who could benefit from these treatments. So we talk about the role of these new psychedelic drugs being used for relationship enhancement, not just treatment of mental illness. Just wrapping up, I'll do a throwback here to the 1980s. This is how MDMA and psilocybin in some contexts was used, at least partly, was for couples counseling until it became prohibited, due largely to political reasons, not scientific reasons. So these psychiatrists talk about their experience with 80 clients, and they argue that MDMA, if it's administered in the right way, can help individuals who aren't necessarily suffering from any diagnosable mental problem have a more healthy and accurate perspective of who they are by decreasing irrational fear responses. And so just how MDMA works, it temporarily reduces hair trigger fear responses by acting directly on emotional centers of the brain. But neurochemically, it causes the massive release of serotonin and some other neurotransmitters and keeps them active for the duration of the drug effects. And this is an interesting point here. It imbues users with a deep sense of love and acceptance of themselves and others. So one thing we'll want to talk about is this sense of love that a person feels while they're under the influence of a drug something that we should embrace and treat as some honest expression of their feelings, or should we be skeptical about this subjective experience of love because it's in some sense drug induced? These psychiatrists say you don't just recommend MDMA to somebody who thinks the pill is going to cure them from some psychological or relational problem, but it's really that we should think of these drugs as facilitating some sort of treatment or enhancement effect in combination with the therapeutic setting and the subjective experiences that the person's having, the meaning making that they engage in as they're under the influence of these drugs. So this is kind of the take-home lesson here. The effects of these drugs wear off after 4 hours or however long it is, depending on the dose. MDMA doesn't magically create or renew love in any sort of long-lasting way, but it's really the lessons learned and the insights that would be gained during the therapy session that the couples then take with them into their normal waking consciousness and actively apply that would drive the change. So I've just got 2 more slides here. How should we think about all this ethically? Well, there's 2 broad approaches that people in bioethics sometimes take. One is to come up with these very narrow case studies. It's sort of like trolley problems for the heart, where you say, could you imagine a couple that had X, Y, and Z characteristics who would, it would be prudent for them or permissible for them to use a drug to enhance their relationship in some context. And Julian and I, our early papers really did focus on this case. We wanted to say, could we imagine a scenario where it would be a good idea to do this? But then people said, you've got to also focus on the wider social implications. Do we want to live in a world where we're ingesting chemical substances to try to, hack our own brains when it comes to our romantic lives? Or do we want to treat this as a mysterious thing that operates on its own logic? So the big worry that people have here, there's lots of them, is that we would be effectively medicalizing our love lives if we were to even introduce drugs into the realm of the heart. So here's a way of expressing that one author has put out there. So many people have reached the normative conclusion that they just don't want to live in a world where increasing swaths of human experience are under the logic of medicine. There are or should be experiences that use an older logic, which are under the jurisdiction of another profession or under no jurisdiction at all. We can all fear the medicalization of love. So my last slide here, in the book, we talk about what that means. What is it about medicalizing love that we should fear? And, there's lots of things we might be worried about. There's the idea that we're going to have to come up with pathology categories to justify why we would give drugs to certain couples. You have relationship commitment disorder or something like that. It could lead to expansion of medical social control. It maybe reinforces that narrow focus on individuals, narrow focus on biology rather than the social circumstances. And then there's that question of maybe there's a threat to authenticity. Are these feelings really real if they're, coming about because of the introduction of a drug? So we're just starting a conversation in this area. We think we need to look at the relational effects of the psychedelic renaissance, and we, invite you all to join that conversation.
Thank you, Brian. That was really enlightening. I'm going to give the floor to Jason to respond.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond really quickly. Thanks very much, Brian. That's definitely very provocative material. I noticed that the Evans quote is, "We can fear it, but that doesn't mean we should fear it." And that's one of the things to bear in mind. Diana 5, or Diana.
Hi there. I think that humans really think a lot about authenticity and about what's authentic or not, but really nothing is really authentic or inauthentic. What comes from you is customizable if you want it to be. And I think one of the good things that came from the before time, before it all ended terribly and tragically, was this idea that you can customize yourself. You can become a somewhat different person. You can have different feelings. And we don't necessarily need to pathologize ourselves in order to want to alter ourselves in ways that align better with what we perceive to be our ideal selves.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wonder if there maybe isn't an objective account of authenticity that we can give that everyone will get on board with. But I think subjectively and phenomenologically, people have the experience of feeling inauthentic. For example, if you're behaving in a way at a party or something like that, you feel like you're talking through a mask. It's not really connecting up with your emotions. So then the question is, well, what does it mean to be authentic just subjectively? Maybe it has something to do with feeling like there's a certain integration with your inner life, where the way that you're behaving or feeling somehow connects up with, as you say, at least your own sense of your true self, whatever that might be. So then the question is, if you use technologies to change your own sense of self, could you have it come about that different things now feel authentic? So, in the book, we talk about, high-tech methodologies of the future that might actually allow us to change our sexual preferences or sexual orientation. Now, right now, that's this huge political controversy. The conversion therapy, as it's called, is this, horrible thing that we've got to try to make sure that doesn't exist. But suppose we had technology in the future that was effective at allowing us to change our sexual orientation. Well, what would be authentic in that case? The post-change desires that we have, or only the ones that, as it were, came to us naturally? So these are the kinds of questions that are raised by technologically intervening in our sexuality and our romantic lives.
So many interesting questions. Brian, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you all for joining us for the morning edition of Undead Live. Tune in to Eat, Pray, Run, coming up next here on Channel Z.
It's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.